since last year, myself and Roger realised that we had a little bit in common. Because if you don't know me, I was a police officer for 20 odd years in the Metropolitan Police. And then I had a change of career and became a criminal. And then I had a change of life and became a Christian. That was in 2002. And if you want to hear the rest of that story, then you'll either have to invite me back or read the book that I'm currently writing in crayon at the moment. And but they keep breaking, so it's a bit difficult. But I met Roger last year and realised that Roger, I did a lot of football duty as a copper over at the Arsenal. Had a big moustache, they call me the Walrus over there. And Roger was, back in those days, he had a little firm of guys and they used to go from Ipswich to Chelsea. And we realised that we'd probably been on different sides of the fence, if you like, during those days. Yeah. So I brought something along that you might remember from those days, Roger. Do you remember? Oh, yes. Do you remember the old? Do you remember the old truncheon?
An old-fashioned truncheon, yeah. Before they got this little play toy.
Well, these days they've got everything, but them days all we had with this.
But
we was a bit useful with it, weren't we, Roger? Do you know?
Quick dig in the ribs.
Yeah, just a quick joke, not as good as Andy's, I'm sure, but a guy is married to his wife, and he spends a lot of time away, so his wife gets a little bit bored, and so she was on to him, and in the end, he went out and bought her a dog. Now, her and this dog bonded, and they were great, and she could control this dog, she found, with whistling. And so she'd whistle here, whistle there, and it would do all sorts of tricks, and the dog was great, and the dog answered to every whistle. Anyway, the fellow's away, and she rings him up, and she said, the dog's turned to death, and I'm whistling, and it's not answering, he's just lying there. And the fellow said, well, what's happened is it's grown older, the hair has gone into its ears, and it's probably made him a little bit deaf. Best thing you can do is go to the chemist and get some hair remover. So she said, that's a good idea. So he goes along to the chemist and says to the chemist, can I have some hair remover? He says, yes, of course you can. He said, but be careful because it's great stuff, but don't leave it on your legs too long because it'll come out in blotches. So wash it off straight away. And if you put it on your on your armpits, wash it off straight away because again, you'll come out in blotches and you'll be a bit distressed. And especially if you put it on your face, wash it off quickly because you don't want to have blotches all over your face. She said, actually, I was going to put it on my schnauzer. He said, well, in that case, don't ride a bike for 3 weeks. Anyone needs that explaining, we'll... We'll, as I go around the country and indeed going around different parts of the world, I realise that men are all from the same dirt, really. And the biggest struggle that we found that men struggle with, and it's the root of a lot of problems in their life, it's their relationship with their earthly father or their relationship with their biological father, whether they're Christian or not. That is the biggest struggle that men go through. And the biggest epidemic I think now we've got in society is we have an epidemic of a fatherless generation. Do you agree with me? We have a fatherless generation. Yeah. Well, I have some quite disturbing statistics, and then it'll lead me through to a line in the end where I'd like to challenge each and every single one of us. The total number of families in the UK, that 15% of those families are one-parent families. 15%. In the US, it's 23%, which is the highest in the world. The world average is 7%. So the UK is double the world average of one-parent families. It's 3% in China and 4% in India. Why is it 3% in China? Well, they tried to work they tried to build a society not on the family, but realised they couldn't. So they introduced the family back. And so it's only 3% in China, which is one of the world's lowest. 80% of that 15% are mothers only families in the UK. They're single mums. What does that lead to? That leads to an awful lot of problems within our society. Out of that, 90% of all runaways and homeless people come from one-parent family or have had a problem with their fathers. Over 60% of all teen suicides are from a one-parent family or problems with their fathers. Over 70% of teen pregnancies and abortions are from a one-parent family and or their fathers have problems with their fathers. A boy in a single mum home is 20 times likely to end up in prison than a boy from a traditional parent home, mother and father, or even where the father is the only parent. 20 times more likely to end up in prison. Now, I visit a lot of prisons as and I've been in a couple recently, High Point out in Cambridgeshire, and in September I'm going to Bure, which is the sex offenders prison out in Norfolk way, Norwich way. And I'd have to do that on my own dime because, our HMP and Majesty's Prison Service don't pay for Christian evangelists to go into prisons these days. But it's such a rewarding part of the stuff I do. But over 70% of men in prison have had problems with their fathers or from a one-parent family. Over 80% of all violent rapes are from a one-parent family or have problems with their fathers. Over 70% of all college dropouts are the same. And over 70% of all male suicides have had problems with their fathers or from a one-parent family. And did you know that suicide is the biggest killer for men between the ages of 20 and 50? Did you know that? I do this podcast, it's called #Christian Straight Talk. I do it with a guy called Ben Cooper. Now, Ben is a church leader down in Kent, and he's done a lot of funerals lately, and a lot of heart attacks, but he's done 5 suicides in the last 4 weeks. The youngest is 21-year-old boy, and the parents left him, came back, and he killed himself. And there was one fella in his 50s, stockbroker up in London, just wrote a letter saying, "You're better off without me." Beautiful family, for no reason at all. They haven't got a clue. But it's happening. It's happening on an epidemic scale. In prison, I remember being in one prison. What happened? It was Mother's Day, so they had about 80 guys who come regular to the church or the chapel service. So they asked everyone to make a card for their mother, whether she was alive or not. Everyone made a card for their mother. So they decided they're going to do one for Father's Day. One guy made a card for his dad. One guy out of 80. See, what happens, this is what happens when we step out of the plan that our Heavenly Father has for the family. His plan, you can read it in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus tells us in Matthew 19:4-6, his plan is for a man to leave his parents and marry a woman, and that is the family unit. And when we step out of that family unit, we are stepping out of God's plan, and mayhem ensues, as we have seen. And even if the father is at home, sometimes he's not present. I meet many men. I speak to them all the time, and I meet many men who say, oh, my father was there, but he never told me he loved me. There was no actual physical contact. There was no hugging or anything like that. I was down in Hereford a couple of weeks, at the beginning of the month, and we just had just a group of fellas, and it wasn't planned, and we just started talking about the father problems. And do you know what? There was 4 or 5 fellas there, all got serious problems with their fathers, and there was a guilt thing because many of them thought when they were younger, when they were little, that it was their fault. Well, of course it wasn't. We had one guy who was ex-SAS, a big tough fella. So much problems when he was smaller with his father. The statistics are horrendous. I was talking to Andy earlier. The average time that a boy will spend with his father these days, and me and Roger were talking about the halcyon days of the 60s and 70s, weren't we? But nowadays, the average time that a boy will spend one-on-one with his father. Any idea? Yeah. For a week. In a week, take 7 days. What is the average time that a boy will spend one-on-one with his father? 30 minutes. 30 minutes is the average time that a boy will spend one-on-one with his father, as opposed to the boy spending 40 hours on the TV, the internet, or gaming. That's a bit more than you, Brian, even, isn't it? You know that. So we have problems, and we have problems coming out of marriage in the UK. Did you know that today 1 in 2 marriages will end up in divorce? So 50% of every marriage ends up in divorce. It's higher when someone marries a second time, it's about 70-odd%, and when someone marries a third time, it's about 80-odd%. In fact, I used to work with a guy, and he delivers my post now, and he delivered something today, and just today on the doorstep, how you doing? He said, well, me and the missus are getting divorced. I said, well, how many is that? He said, that's my third one. My third one. So easy, isn't it, to get divorced today? So easy, too easy, yeah. Too easy just to pack it in and say, look, I've had enough, and walk away.
Selfishness.
Yeah, big time. Of Christian families, of Christian men and women who you can halve that, so it's about 25% of Christian families will end up in divorce. 25% of couples who are not married end up in divorce, and with a 40% split, of couples who are not married end up in divorce. We have a generation of lost men, gentlemen. We have a generation in the UK of lost men. We have a generation of men who do not know their identity in the UK. Men just don't know who they are. So consequently, we have a generation of men who are little boys in men's bodies. I see it all the time. 50-year-old men who are just a little boy seeking validation from wherever they can get it, seeking recognition from wherever they can get it. I see it all the time. I had a guy ring me up the other day, crying his eyes out on the phone. He's 50 years old, and he went down in his car to sit in his car, listen to some music, but he was 3 times over the limit. He didn't drive it, he was just sitting in it. He got arrested for drunken charge, crying on it, his eyes out on the phone. Take responsibility, my friend. Take responsibility of your life. No, it's always someone else's fault. And he rang me up and he said, oh, I think I'm going to get off that, Pinchy. He said, I think I'm going to get off that, Pinchy. He said, the Lord's in this. And I went berserk. I said, the Lord's not in this. I said, take responsibility. Take responsibility. And he'd never heard it. He'd never heard tough love. Because everyone he spoke to, oh, there. Oh, it's such a shame. I said, no. Yeah. I said, get yourself sorted. I'll support you 100%, but you need to get yourself sorted. Sometimes you just got to say it, haven't you? We got no role models anymore, have we? We haven't got any role models anymore. What are the kids growing up today? What is their role model? Andrew Tate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, but Andrew Tate's a very machismo type of guy, and he's made a very successful life out of being a machismo type of guy. So we have guys who want to follow Andrew Tate, but not equipped to follow Andrew Tate. Because they haven't had his upbringing, they don't know, they just want to jump into it, and it all goes wrong. Role models are music stars, rappers, football stars. Trouble is, the greatest role model that ever lived was Jesus Christ. Strongest man that ever lived was Jesus Christ. The greatest role model, and we don't teach that. I don't think the church teaches that. I don't think we say enough. Read the Gospels. Read about this man. Read about him. If you want to challenge in your life, follow Christ. Follow him. That's the biggest challenge you'll ever have, but it'll be an exciting challenge. Let me ask you here right now, and we've had a nice, lovely barbecue, but let's challenge each other. And I want to ask you a question, and I've asked it before, but I see some new faces, so I'll ask it again. I want to be honest, please, because we're in a safe spot. Has anybody in your life ever told you you're rubbish? Anybody ever told you you're no good? Everybody ever told you you'll never achieve anything in your life? Yeah? Anybody else? Yeah? Anybody else? Well, the problem is when people say that to you, see, words are like seeds and they go into us and then they're watered. So every negative thing on top of that will water that seed, and eventually we'll either start believing that we're no good. See, these things, like Roger said, these things can go one way, they can go another way, but neither way is any very great. One way they can go is that we start believing this stuff, and we start not taking a job maybe that we can do our job much better than the one we've taken. Why? Because we don't want to be criticised. We end up in a marriage that's where maybe we're being dominated by the woman because that's the way it is. And we end up being some sort of rudderless wet blanket as a man. My son runs my grandson's 6-year-old football team. And he takes some training, he takes some for matches. Now they've just got little matches, bless them. And it's normally the mums that take the boys to the games, more than the mums that take the boys training. And one mum, she was new, she came up, she said, Tom, this is my boy, she said, Tom, can you teach him to man up a little bit, because he's a wet blanket. She said, but then again, his dad's a wet blanket. In front of his son. Yeah. Do you know, this is what we got. This is what. So, or we go the other way and we go, do you know what? I'm determined. I'm going to prove him. I'm going to prove him wrong. Whoever said that, maybe, especially if it's your father. And I know many men that their fathers have come down on them and said, you'll never do anything in your life. I'm going to prove to him. And they go off and they make a success of their lives as the world sees it. But nothing will ever be good enough. The same as the other guy, nothing is ever validated enough. Why? Because all you wanted was your father to put his arm around you and go, I love you, son. I love you, son. You can do this. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, son. No matter what you do, I'm proud of you. So what do we end up doing? We end up putting our identity in all sorts of stuff, don't we? We put our identity in our homes, our jobs. What do you do for a living, mate? That's basically what we say when we first, and we try and judge where we are with that person, don't we? We put it in our cars. We put it in, our money. We put even in a funeral, people will go, "How much did he leave?" I mean, in a funeral, someone will go, "How much did he leave?" Well, the answer is, what's the answer? He left it all, didn't he?
Yeah.
We all leave the same, don't we? We all leave it all. None of us can take it with us. So it's nonsense, that identity. And we try, and sometimes you see fellas living vicariously through other, that's a big word for men in sheds. So, so you see guys trying to live their lives through other guys, don't you? They even put names on their shirts and all that sort of stuff, you know. So, and it's normally the better players. They've got names on their shirts, haven't they? So that's a sort of, we try and do that just because we're searching for identity. We're searching for identity, searching to find out who we are. So men are looking for a challenge. I think men, especially as they approach middle age, are looking for a challenge, looking for an adventure. Because when all of a sudden you look at your life and you think, oh, I've lived more than I'm going to live. I haven't done much. And so into the arena comes men in lycra riding bikes. don't it? You see them, don't you? You see them, men in lycra riding bikes. every Sunday, they're out there, and or they'll jump out of a plane, or go, or worse still, they'll have an affair. You know, worse still, they'll be tempted to have an affair, bit of excitement outside the marriage, because they're looking for something more than what they've got. You know, even in churches, people are looking for identity, aren't they? What church do you go to? How big's your church? Well, I've got the Father, Son, Holy Ghost and me every now and again. You know, but it don't matter, does it? It don't matter how big your church is. Because as I was saying, there's 150,000 people live in Ipswich. On a Sunday, there's probably 1,500 go to church. That's 1%. That's 1%. How many of them are truly walking in a relationship with Jesus Christ? Half, I would say. So 0.5% of the people in Ipswich, it's a big harvest. So it doesn't matter how big your church is. There's a huge area, and it's called the kingdom of God out there. Do you want a challenge? If you want a challenge, if you want some identity, give your life to Christ, then you'll be challenged, and then you'll start to live an exciting life. How do we change this? How can we get to that route if we're in there? Well, first of all, we need to know who we are, don't we? We need to know who we are. And if you're a Christian, you need to know who you are in Christ, really. Have you ever asked God this question? Who do you say I am? Father, who do you say I am? Because I guarantee that if you ask that question, you're not going to get back, oh, you're that piece of rubbish we made. Oh, you're that, we never thought you'd ever make anything of yourself. That's not the answer you're going to get back. Because he made every single one of you, and you're perfect in his eyes, and he loves you the way you are, but he loves you so much that he wants you to come to him and maybe be a bit more like his son. And Jesus is not saying, oh, I wish I'd never gone to the cross for you. He's not saying that. Because if you were the only person in the world, he would have gone to the cross for you. I've got a poem here. I'm going to read this poem. I like this. I love this poem. And as we come into land, I want to read it to you because it's all about who we are. It says, you are who you are for a reason. You're part of an intricate plan. You're a precious and perfect, unique design called God's special woman or man. You look like you look for a reason, but our God made no mistake. He knit you together within the womb. You're just who he wanted to make. Your parents you had were the ones he chose, and no matter how you may feel, they were custom designed with God's plan in mind, and they bear the master's seal. That struggle you went was not easy, and God wept that it hurt you so, but it was allowed to shape your heart so that into his likeness you grow. You are who you are for a reason. You've been formed by the Master's rod. You are who you are, beloved, because there is a God. See, when you know who you are, when you know that there's a God in heaven, a Heavenly Father who wants to know you and loves you, then you can learn to love yourself. And loving yourself is a big thing. Because if we don't love ourselves, how can we then love each other? We need to love ourselves. So the challenge I'm going to end on today with this is ask that question. But personally ask that question. But I'm going to end with this challenge is that either today when you get home or tomorrow or at some time during the weekend, tell your wife, your children, your grandchildren you love them, either by text, telephone call or in person. And if you want to take that a step further, do this. Write each of them a letter. Write each of them a letter telling them what you think of them, how much you love them. Because I tell you something, letters are powerful and they'll take that letter will stay with them for the rest of their lives, believe me.